Hi, I'm Cheryl Kagan, very proud to be the Senator for Gaithersburg and Rockville, and delighted to be hosting the next episode of Kibbitzing with Kagan with wonderful nonprofit leader Ann Mazur of EveryMind. Ann, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me, Cheryl. Really appreciate it and look forward to our conversation.
Great. So there are a lot of people who haven't heard of EveryMind because they know the Mental Health Association, the old name. There was a pivot back in 2016. Why don't you briefly tell us why that was and the difference?
Yes. Yes, it was 4 years ago in 2016. We renamed from the Mental Health Association of Montgomery County, Maryland to EveryMind. First and foremost, I hope just by giving you that example, you realize that we saw EveryMind as a more inclusive name and more approachable. It was one of the things that we looked at as far as stigma reduction, to make it a more welcoming, because mental health, especially years ago, had stigma associated with it. And also our services are broader than just Montgomery County, and that was another reason for the name change.
Okay, so you have been there a long time, 14 years, with the past 4.5 years as its CEO. Tell us more about some of the changes in priorities and practices over the time of your tenure.
Yeah, it's been a wonderful 14 years. And I will say the last 4 years as CEO has been a whirlwind. I actually moved into the CEO role 6 months before we did the rebrand that we just spoke about. So that and we celebrated our 60th anniversary the following year. So the first 2 years were certainly a whirlwind, and we spent a lot of time making sure that people knew about the rebrand and that we still provided the same services. And I will say that over the past couple years, we have seen growth across our programming, additional funding from the county, from nonprofit, from foundations. And we know that there's a huge need, and we've been experiencing additional funding. So we've been able to grow the program. So we're excited to talk about that.
That's fantastic. So that was going to be my next question, was talk about the range of services, if you would. And I know that you've got a special focus on veterans and those who are without homes. And your own family is a veteran family, a military family. So why don't you talk about all of that?
Yeah, we at EveryMind, we look at mental health in the broad sense. So everything from individuals that might have something occurring, a divorce, loss of job, something like that, all the way to mental illness. And we serve across the lifespan. So we have programming in partnership with Montgomery County Public Schools that serves our youth and families at the schools. We have, as you mentioned, case managers that do homeless outreach on the streets of Montgomery County. We run the 24/7 hotline for the county, which is phone, text, and chat hotline. We'll talk a little bit more about that. And as you mentioned, our program that specifically works with our veterans and their families is Serving Together. We also have some other programs that work with older adults, a friendly visitor, and representative payee. So across the lifespan and mental health support for all of those different populations.
So how do you get the word out that you exist? How would someone get access to the phone line if I haven't given them one of your handy dandy bookmarks?
Well, certainly in this day and age, we are trying to promote on social media. Our social media tags, and I'll say it again at the end, but we're on all forms of social media, and our tag is at EveryMind Inc. And our website is every-mind.org. And so I would encourage people to follow us on social media and also subscribe to our newsletter, because we share resources for individuals across the community and, the hotline numbers, et cetera. And right now in the times of COVID, there's not much of handing out those nice little hotline cards anymore.
Exactly. And to be clear, we will have a slide with all the social media information at the end. And on the website, you can also contribute to support the important work of EveryMind. So make sure you consider doing that. So how has COVID affected your caseload?
We have seen across our programming anywhere from 30% to almost 50% increase in demand. And as I mentioned, we have a lot of different programs. So we are seeing, a spike in calls and outreach to our hotline, and also with our services within our school-based programming, obviously greater need, because with loss of jobs, uncertainty about the future, illness, the challenges of caregiving, whether it's for someone that's ill or an older family member, or you don't have childcare, the uncertainty about jobs and food insecurity. We've seen huge rise in demand across our programming for those basic needs in services. And that obviously, all of those contribute to, our emotional and mental wellness.
So if someone calls the hotline, can they also get information about referrals? Is it talk therapy? What's the range of services that are provided by someone calling?
I'm glad you asked that question, because there is a range of services. You can call and they can work with you for referrals. Also, we encourage, you don't have to be in a crisis to reach out to the hotline. It is a hotline that does have crisis services, and we are actually the local affiliate to answer the National Suicide Lifeline. So if someone locally were to call that National Suicide Lifeline, it's routed to our call center. So we do answer and handle crisis calls, but over about 85% of our calls are what we call supportive listening. So someone that is having a challenge, they're not in crisis, but they really need support, need to speak to someone. Mm-hmm. The other point I always like to try to make is that you can call if you're concerned about someone else. So, if you have a family member or neighbor or friend that you're concerned about, that you're not sure, what to say, how to handle it, you can call the hotline and talk with our call counselors and ask them for, some advice on how to deal with the situation. So that's a really important component, that you can call not only for yourself, but if you're concerned about someone else.
So, Ann, normally I have questions that are prepared, and every so often one or two occur to me. I've got a million more questions for you. So first question is, talk about the disclosure. Does someone have to give their name, their contact information, their email, mailing address, phone number if they are calling?
The hotline is anonymous.
Okay, so that's important, because then there is still a stigma. So privacy, you're not collecting data, you're not keeping notes on who's worried about what issues.
No, the hotline is anonymous and absolutely completely anonymous. They will ask at the end of a call if someone does want to share, the age group that they're in, or some of those other demographics. They'll ask the questions, but in no way are those required. It's important for us, if people are willing to share some of that information, to understand, if we're seeing a trend. We've had times in our community where, unfortunately, maybe there was a suicide in a high school, and then, we see trends where we're getting, more teenage calls, right? So sometimes some of those information, but it's completely confidential, completely anonymous. But we do ask, if people are willing to share, to help support in that way.
Great. Talk to me about the type of training that the call takers get. And if someone wanted to volunteer, how long is the arc if they wanted to be on the phones, and what sort of skills are you looking for?
The Training is a little over 50 hours, and anyone can that's interested in either volunteering or a paid position on the hotline. You don't have to have specific qualifications. What we say the most important skill is listening.
Yep.
Most important skill. And so it is an intensive training. It is a certified training. And throughout the training, we work with the volunteers or the future staff members, taking a call, what to do. There's plenty of support and backup, but those listening skills are key.
Absolutely. So we know how diverse Montgomery County is, not just ethnically, but linguistically. So does EveryMind use the language line for interpreters? Do you try to get people on the hotline, working, volunteering at the hotline who are multilingual? How do you handle that?
Currently, we're working to try to get more people that are bilingual, multilingual on the hotline. But we have a partnership with the Montgomery County Crisis Center. Mm-hmm. And so that first and foremost is our first go-to in partnership. The Crisis Center has all language capacities and multilingual staff. So if we cannot handle the call, we do a warm transfer to the Crisis Center. And that warm transfer, our call counselor will stay on, connect the person to the Crisis Center, and find someone with the appropriate language. There also is.
But the call center will stay on the line so as to have that skilled conversation. You're not transferring the call.
Well, the Crisis Center actually also can have that skilled conversation. The Montgomery County Crisis Center is trained to have that skilled conversation because we don't have, as much multilingual capacity as we would like. We're trying to add that, but we're primarily English speaking. There also are, and I'll share that, there is a Spanish speaking hotline also that we refer individuals to.
Okay. We will put all of this available later. I think this is such important information. Before we pivot to another space, you referenced the suicide hotline. And as you may know, I've been deeply involved with 911, and the whole question of the evolution and onboarding of 988 is really important, which is going to be a national suicide hotline. So when you said EveryMind is connected, how do people decide when to call 911, when to call 988, and when to just call the hotline?
That's a great question. And I'm glad you brought up 988. So yes, the National Suicide Lifeline will transition to 988. I believe right now the time frame is in the spring of 2022.
July of 2022, but T-Mobile on its own system, and I'm not endorsing a brand, but they are active now.
Yes, and so the one piece that we have been working with, our colleagues, across the state of Maryland and even broader than that, is what the impact of 988 is going to be. We are so supportive of 988 because to have 988 versus a 10-digit phone number, we think is absolutely, the best solution that we could have so that people could have that quick access. I think that the primary reason to look at, calling, the National Suicide Lifeline versus 911 versus the local hotline number is, if it's, emotional, mental health, then I first would turn to, the hotline or the National Suicide Lifeline prevention, depending on, where you feel you are in a crisis. And you don't have to determine that, it would be easy to call 988, which is why we're supportive of that, that number coming on board.
Good. So we're in the midst of a pandemic, and we're in the midst of the holiday season. And either of those could trigger people. People who haven't had behavioral health challenges in the past, mental health challenges in the past, but this is tough. So can you talk about what you have experienced as some of the triggers that people are having? And are there any tips other than calling the hotline, reaching out for support from friends and family and stuff? Any other tips that can help either during the holidays or during the pandemic?
Yeah, no, I'm glad you asked that question. And your point about in the middle of a pandemic, we have seen so many individuals reach out that never before had to reach out. Similar to what we're seeing that across the country, and across obviously our state and here in Montgomery County, that there's people that are food insecure that have never been food insecure in their lives, right? People that don't have a paycheck coming in that have never been in that situation. So that is obviously compounding, and we're seeing the same thing on the hotline. A couple of things are, really to find, that one or two things, really, if it's just one, for self-care, whether that's, playing with your dog, taking a walk, little things like that is so important for people right now. The other thing is setting a schedule, and no matter, because everyone's schedules look different now, but setting a schedule is really, really, really helpful. And you don't have to have that schedule packed, from start to finish. And setting
note to self,
right. But with that schedule, like, try to set one, maybe two priorities for the day. And so try to focus that, okay, this is just like the one thing that I definitely want to get done today. And, and if you're able to do that, pat yourself on the back, and then, you can move on to the next, but not to make it so overwhelming. So if you can break things down, have a schedule, and really limit the number of, priorities that you have on your plate.
So that's almost like the feeling of being empowered and in control when we don't control the pandemic and we don't control the weather or our moods or other people getting sick.
No, exactly. It's exactly the point. And so if you can bring it down to one or two things that you control, one or two things that you enjoy, that are going to be beneficial for you and your family. And just focus on one or two things.
Right. So over Thanksgiving, a lot of people were sad because they're used to getting together with the entire extended family, friends, neighbors, and they didn't feel like they could do that or do it safely. And those that ignored those warnings, there have been consequences in additional spikes. So as Christmas is around the corner, and New Year's and all that, and we're not going to be able to go to parties and stuff, Zoom isn't the same, but does that work as a substitute? Are there other suggestions that you all are giving?
You're right. Zoom's not a substitute, but it is, it's a good solution that we have now, right? So connecting by Zoom is certainly an option. Maybe it's a great time to, start a new tradition. If you're, staying home and you normally travel, maybe there's, something that you always wanted to do. Maybe you didn't, normally, I don't know, whether it's a new recipe or something like that. But think about things that you in the past maybe, wish you had more time to do. And now that you have the opportunity to stay home, stay with your immediate family, whether, it's a recipe, enjoying a movie, taking a walk, going for a drive and going to see, decorations and start some new traditions.
I've been exposed to Marie Kondo, who I'd never heard of before, and the whole sort of really wrestling my house and that junk drawer, which had too much junk in it and, stuff like that, which can be very gratifying. So
Yeah, the Marie Kondo is, I love that too. I've been exposed to that too. Yeah, so tackle some of those things that, with all the running around, because, hopefully soon we'll be, starting to take some steps before, back to normalcy. So you'll feel great about getting some of those projects done that you've been wanting to do.
exactly. So I just have a couple more questions before we get to our fast five. Um, EveryMind works in partnership with a lot of other nonprofits. Can you give us a brief idea of some of the organizations that you work with? And you are a board member and the treasurer of Nonprofit Montgomery. Can you give an idea of the whole nonprofit sector here in Montgomery County, and just how we connect and what we should be thinking about and how we can support the whole sector?
Yeah, yes, we work with nonprofits across the county. I will mention, like with Serving Together, which is our program that works with veterans. Our work there is really as the hub to a hub and spoke model. So we refer veterans based on their need to housing providers, food providers, health providers, employment. So in that, and specifically in that program, we work with hundreds of other nonprofits. And then with our school-based work, we also have a lot of partners. We're one of the providers of Linkages to Learning. And so also Family Services and the YMCA are other providers. So we work in tandem with them and with Montgomery County Public Schools and the Department of Health and Human Services. And then also the school system, in partnership with the school system, we have high school wellness centers. Several of those are run by Identity, another nonprofit in the community. And so we, for instance, are a subcontractor to Identity and provide the mental health services at the wellness centers that they run. So a lot of coordination and collaboration, and we all have to work together. Regarding Nonprofit Montgomery, for those that are not familiar with Nonprofit Montgomery, it's a membership association for nonprofits in Montgomery County, and provides opportunities for education, capacity building, financial training, all different aspects to run a nonprofit, and education everywhere from leadership and the CEO role to frontline staff. And so I'd encourage anyone that has not heard of Nonprofit Montgomery or is not a member to go ahead and check that out if you're work with a nonprofit in the community.
Definitely. I have to give you props because I asked you like 43 questions all in one, and you answered them all. So thank you. I should have chopped it up a little more. So good work. You mentioned a 30 to 50% increase in caseload. Tell me how your fundraising has gone. Have we seen that kind of revenue increase too, or not so much?
Certainly not to those levels. I will say what we have seen in fundraising with some long-term funders, and I think that a lot of nonprofits are seeing this, where especially in the spring, a lot of those funders, instead of going through new processes and grant applications and reaching out to new funders, a lot of those funders were very quick to renew funding for the next year. So that made things a lot easier. We have in mental health seen new funders. I think that one of the, for us, I mentioned, part of the name change was as we were working on stigma reduction. I will say one of the things that I would say is a silver lining of the pandemic, in an unfortunate way. The demand for mental health services is skyrocketing. But I think that everyone can say that people are talking about mental health and their own personal mental health and the impact that the pandemic has had on their mental health. And so just the fact that people are willing to talk about it, share about what they're struggling with, has, taken us probably, 10, 15 years in strides with stigma reduction. So it's a
tiny silver lining.
Right? Yeah, right. Because yeah, that's why I hesitate to even call it a silver lining.
We've got to look for the bright side of something, because the 2020, we've just got to get through it and celebrate some good stuff. So, Ann Mazur, it is time for the Fast Five. Five questions that are pretty random. So first off, what is your proudest accomplishment in this job?
Oh, wow. I would say the success of the rebrand and the name change. It was a huge undertaking, and I had not done something like that in the past, and we feel like it was a great success. And so, yeah.
Good for you. So, what is a hobby that you have developed either recently or have had for a long time that distracts you and lifts you up?
I am a water lover. I grew up near the ocean, and so I love to kayak or swim. Yeah.
Nice. Okay. I hope you're finding opportunities to do that in the midst of all this, or will soon.
Well, I'm missing the fact that it's winter now. That's another thing. But, in the summer months, Black Hills, if you haven't gone over there, you can rent boats and kayaks. And it's one of my favorite places when here in Montgomery County to go and rent a kayak over at Black Hills.
Super. Number 3, since we're talking about behavioral health and depression and anxiety and all of those realities, tell me something that makes you laugh.
Oh my goodness. Something that makes me laugh. My 19-year-old daughter is the first thing that comes to mind. There's, at that age group, right, there's always something new, whether it's something with social media or a slang word or whatever it might be. I feel like there's always something new and something that gives me some light in my day.
Nice. That's great. When it's easy to do so and we can safely do it again, where would you like to travel?
I would love to. I was fortunate to, in the summer of 2019, before all this happened, go on a Mediterranean cruise.
Nice.
And and it gave me a chance to, get a little taste of things. So I want to go back to Italy, specifically the Tuscany region and the Amalfi Coast.
Beautiful. All right. And the last question, which is the one that I ask of everyone, what is your hidden superpower? What is a skill that you are really good at that most people can't do?
Based on the last 9 months and where we are, I think I'm going to say maintaining a calm and focused approach during uncertainty.
Amen. Thank you for having that skill. That's important, especially in your role. So thank you for that. And thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your leadership of such an important nonprofit in Montgomery County. Thanks for all that you do, and happy holidays.
Thank you. Happy holidays to you. And thank you again for inviting me. I was happy to have the conversation and share with you today.